You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 130. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action today. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, and I'm excited to share my stories and life lessons with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hey friends, welcome to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac. If you're anything like me, then this whole Metaverse thing and Facebook changing its name to Meta is pretty confusing. I honestly have no idea what the Metaverse actually is. And honestly, I think that maybe it's some alternate reality video game that a guy in his mom's basement is playing. Now, since I'm confused about it, I thought this would be a great time to call in an expert. Co-founder of advertising agency Technology, Humans, and Taste, or THAT, and Emmy Award winner Nathan Phillips is defining and explaining what the Metaverse actually is. Trust me when I tell you that your mind is about to be blown because it's much simpler than we all think it is, and we're all actually using it. I promise that after listening to my conversation with Nathan, you are not only going to understand the Metaverse, but might even be able to explain it to others. The other thing that you're going to learn from this episode is that we're all actually nerds. Hi, Nathan.
Hi, how's it going?
Oh, it's good. I am really excited to talk to you because for months I've been getting to know you and what you know. And I have to be honest with you, all of my pitches, I actually say that I feel like you're a genius and because your knowledge is so beyond me. So
I'm just doing my best to keep it weird as hard as I can.
Can you introduce yourself to everyone for a moment, please?
Yeah, my name is Nathan Phillips, and I'm a co-founder of Technology, Humans, and Taste, or THAT, here in Chinatown, New York City. And I'm looking out on the street right now. And I'm also the director of concept design here, which is how we approach kind of our creative output. The company is a creative company that works with all sorts of organizations, lots with brands to make stuff, but also with governmental organizations, with nonprofits, with startups, with technology companies, to figure out ways to create experiences and what we call theme parks that allow people to kind of explore stories in interesting new ways.
And what you guys do is fascinating. I love that you have these meetings where you make up things and that's how you come up with solutions. You've worked on the Van Gogh experience. I know you had a Super Bowl ad. That was very big in our house, just so you know. I made sure because I was missing the Super Bowl due to Disney on Ice. So
Oh boy.
I had to show my 6-year-old son, I'm like, this on YouTube is the commercial you're going to look for. And I'm like, we know the people who created this. And he was so jazzed. Oh, that was
That's
like
cool.
bigger than the halftime show for him. So
That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate that. My 4-year-old and 8-year-old were exactly the opposite. They did not really, they weren't interested in Papa's commercial at all, but they were super into the halftime show.
I mean, there was dancing with the halftime show too, but it definitely made everyone sit down, stop, look, it's the commercial.
Yeah. Well, and that, the Super Bowl is a funny thing because it's not a football game anymore. And I think that's kind of indicative of our approach to stuff, is to first kind of call into question what it is we're looking at. Because with like all technology and media, there's a lot of assumptions that are made. So it's like, oh, it's the Super Bowl, it's a football game. And it's like, well, it's not really a football game anymore, right? There's a football game that happens, but it's become a much bigger kind of cultural communication. And I think when you look at where people have the conversations, where they get the most value from, including things like snacks, nachos are an incredible social platform, right? Everyone has like a way to approach it. It's very interactive. It changes the way you talk. It's all about sharing. So we always try to think of ways to use all those tools to create an immersive experience. So with our Super Bowl commercial, which was for Criteo, we tried to imagine a world where every choice you made really impacted the future. And so in the commercial, you're in a cafe and there's a woman who's about to use her phone and she's approached by herself from 20 years in the future who has a message from her for her. But before she can deliver it, another person from even further in the future shows up, and then another, and then another, until the cafe is filled with all these different versions of her future self, and they can't agree. And it's about the idea that the future is ultimately yours to control with each choice you make on the internet. And so the goal with something like that is to start, like, obviously to create a lot of like recall for the brand, awareness for the brand, but to do so by getting people to have a conversation about it as opposed to them talking about what a great brand they are, because that's the first thing to do if you want to get people to ignore you.
And was it successful in your
Yeah,
opinion?
it's been really successful. Opinions play a very small role in advertising, but based on all the metrics and measurement and everything that we've been exposed to, it's been really successful, and it's still running in all sorts of places and extends in a lot of interesting ways out in the world. There's a great website. There's multiple versions of the commercial as well as shorter commercials that tell a slightly different story. So yeah, it's going great. Really, you'd be surprised how effective it is when you make something that is fun for people to
Well, and you
watch.
make all kinds of fun things, the interactive wallpaper. Like this is very out of the box. And this is coming from, I like to call myself creative, but it's definitely not to the extreme that you and your team are.
I appreciate that, and I think for us, the idea of being creative, I think, is often treated like a magical power, um, right? And it's like I'm creative, and therefore, like I'm going to do this to my hair or wear these sneakers. And the thing about creativity is that like creativity is just solving a problem. So in that sense, creativity is like the most common human function. Like everyone is creative across all spectrums of cerebral function. I think what's really interesting and what I've learned moving from like the art space into advertising is the power of strategy, because strategy is actually a really, really amazing way to come up with ideas. So rather than saying, all right, I'm looking at a blank sheet of paper, what do I think is cool today? It's actually identifying like a way to approach a problem with a specific outcome in mind, and then coming up with an idea that does that. The way I like to describe it is like art is where you make a show and then invite an audience, but advertising is where you invite the audience and then you have to figure out what show to make for them.
Mm.
And that's why like augmented reality wallpaper isn't really a very it's kind of obvious, right? It's like wallpaper's everywhere, wallpaper is static. There's AR everywhere. AR generally sucks, but is cool when you use it. So let's take the most boring static medium, wallpaper, and make it active in the easiest way possible with your phone. And so that's how we kind of got to that idea. And it's really cool. It's very beautiful, handmade wallpaper. It's illustrated by this incredible artist, Edwina White. And we made it in partnership with the New York Double Dutch League. And it features these double dutchers and cool animations of people doing double dutch and stuff. But it's also just very nice wallpaper.
Yeah, you're even bringing jump roping back. So
Yeah. I went to with my little girls. We went to the World Championships at the Apollo,
oh, how
which is
fun.
where we actually launched the Allpaper, which is the name of the wallpaper, and it was completely amazing. Really, what an incredible sport!
That's amazing. And it's funny because my kids, they like to jump rope. They're kind of learning, they're only 6 and 7. So it's like the throwback.
Yeah,
But
it's
it's
really fun.
incredible when you can do it and you can do it well, and crisscrossing and the double dutch and all. phenomenal. And I think the wallpaper that you created was so fascinating. You're working on all of these amazing products. You also are knowledgeable on the metaverse. And I think that so many of us regular people are like, the what? Like, what does that even mean? To the extent that Facebook renamed themselves.
Mm-hmm.
What is the metaverse? What does this mean for us? What if, like, I don't do anything with virtual reality or artificial intelligence or anything that I know of?
Yeah, I think that thing that you just said is like the key, right?
Mhm.
um, because for me, like, to be knowledgeable about the metaverse is like to say you're knowledgeable about reality. It's really hard to quantify, like, how much do you know about how the world works, but like, do you know how to interact with it? Yeah, like, you're an expert at interacting with reality. And so I think the way that I would think about the metaverse is, first you can like look around you, and then think about the physical rules of reality. There's some gravity, there's this air. It takes a certain amount of time to walk, or to, if you're using a device, to roll or whatever, to a different location. And that's all stuff that you know to be true. The metaverse is an invisible layer on top of that. Now, that could be filled with floating street signs that tell you where to go, or the information of how long it will take you to get there. But it could also change the shape of how you're getting there. We made an augmented reality shopping cart that became a rocket ship, right? So that rocket ship existed in the metaverse, and the shopping cart existed in reality. So to me, the metaverse is this invisible layer of information that exists over reality. What's cool is, if you only look at that invisible layer of information and you kind of darken the background, and reality starts to kind of disappear a little bit, and then you're only looking at that invisible layer of information, then you're immersed in a digital environment. That would be virtual reality. If you can see the real world, it's AR. If you can't see the real world, it's VR. But the rules are the same as real life. The cool thing about the metaverse, or the digital space, is that different things can happen and different rules can apply. So when we're talking about approaching the metaverse creatively, rather than talking about AR, or rather than talking about VR or any of the technology, in the same way you don't talk about how a house is built, you just go to the house.
Mhm.
We talk about it as an act of wish fulfillment, right? So look at a thing and say, what would you most like to happen? And then we go, well, this would be the coolest thing possible. And then we go, cool. Well, how would you make it? And then it's like, well, if we were going to make it, we'd need to do an AR thing, and then it's like, cool. Now we have an idea, right? Too often, I think people get caught up in the technology or the Mark Zuckerberg of it all, but really, it's just a digital twin, and you can exist in it at the same time as reality.
So would you call it like a video game?
It's like a video game in some ways. I think in a video game, um, you are pretty limited in what you can do. Um, Whereas, like, in the metaverse, you have complete agency. You can wander around in any direction you want. Whereas if you're playing Red Dead Redemption or whatever, there are paths you need to choose from. But it's definitely similar, right? I think that's a cool way to think about it.
Yeah.
Um, and you can apply points to stuff, and add games in the metaverse in a way that you can't in reality, right? But let's say there's that, I guess it's probably Folgers or whatever, where people are asleep and they wake up to the smell of coffee.
Right. Because somebody has snuck home to welcome, surprise them, and
Right.
they've made coffee.
Yeah. So is that coffee? Is that family? Is that what is that? And that is one of those extended reality experiences, or mixed reality experiences, where coffee isn't just coffee. Coffee is coffee, but it's also the molecules that blow off there interacting with your nose. So all AR is, all VR is doing that with your eyes, right? It's just letting you see something that in a different way, using a different set of senses and a different different set of technology. Coffee uses a coffee maker. VR uses goggles.
So it seems like it's like this alternate way to kind of escape reality into this other kind of wishful reality. Would that be a good comparison?
Well, no, I think and also, by the way, if I'm being too artsy fartsy about it, you can tell me and I'll try to do it.
No, artsy
um,
fartsy's
but
fine.
the, the, there are a couple things, right? So like, whatever room you're in, like if you look around at the room, there are surfaces made of materials that were produced by humans. Like a lot of it's all man-made, right? Um, and then there's the actual like geographic territory you're on. But then there's like what you do in the room. And what you do in the room is very different than the surfaces of the room. And one of the hardest parts about the metaverse is the metaverse the things we do in the room, or is the metaverse the surfaces of the room? And that's where people get confused. So when you say the metaverse is like, you know, a reality that is like somehow better than or different than reality, it's like, well, not necessarily, right? In the same way that a room can be filled with arguments or filled with love, right?
Mm.
The metaverse is just a digital layer that exists all around you. And being able to see it is entering the metaverse. And once you can see it and you can interact with it, it just changes the nature of how you engage with the world. Because in the same way, when you open up a map, all of a sudden you're looking at the world in a different way. That map is an alternate reality. It's an organized version of what you're looking at. And on Google Maps, it's algorithmically driven, and you can get all of this data about traffic and about weather. And that's the metaverse, right? It's just how you interact with that stuff. If you look at like in the early days of Manhattan, before it was Manhattan, and the Dutch took control of this island, they started to change the topography, right? And eventually they were like, you know what? All of you farmers need to make way for the rich Dutch at the bottom of Manhattan. And what did they do? They imposed a grid system on the island, right?
Mm-hmm.
That grid system made it possible for neighborhoods to form, for cultures to exist, for the East Village to create punk rock. And so when we impose these structures on reality, it changes the way we interact with it. I think what I'm interested in is what happens to people when they exist in this new place, and how do we serve them, and how do we create additive experiences so the way they navigate this extra layer of information is helpful and is ethical. I think what I'm scared of is when people think of the metaverse as just the grid system, because that's not enough, right? You can't just make a grid system and leave it up to people. You have to be thoughtful about how you impose this extra structure on people's experience.
And so do you think that the metaverse is going to be something that impacts all of us? Like I don't play video games really at all. We don't have the goggles. Is this going to be something that impacts me in some way? Think of me as like, the mom, the 40-year-old mom of two who's, in her closet recording type of thing. How does the metaverse even affect me?
Well, do you have a credit card?
Yes.
And when you use it, do you get points and you spend them on stuff?
Yes.
Well, then you do play games, right?
Well, I get money back, so
right.
I've never thought of it as a game. It's a reward, friend.
Yeah, it's the same. It is 100% a game mechanic, right? And that's exactly how video games use. It's just the interface is different because you believe that you aren't pretending to be somebody else. And so you're looking at it as a credit card, when in reality, all you're doing is it's a first person shooter where you're swiping instead of pulling a trigger. And you said, like, I'm a 45-year-old mother of two
40,
in my closet.
not 45.
40.
Give me those 5 years back.
You can have them. Totally apologize. I misheard you. Based on our interactions, I would have pegged you at no more senior than 32.
Oh, thank you.
But you're in your closet recording, right?
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Because you're in your closet recording is like a kind of a broad statement. What you're doing is connecting to a cloud-based server, right? And you're creating this incredibly complex interaction where, like, I'm in New York City on headphones walking around an office. You're in your closet for sound reasons. You are totally wrapped deeply and warmly in the arms of the metaverse right now. It's just familiar to you, right? And like I said, you are an expert on how you deal with reality. You are an expert in how you deal with the metaverse. Where it gets confusing is when these nerds start talking about the metaverse like it's a new thing, or they talk about the metaverse like this is going to be the future of business. And it's like they're just trying to trick people and market to people. At the end of the day, you are surrounded by screens, you are surrounded by cameras, you interact with them all the time. And the richer those interactions, the more rewarding those interactions, the more you'll enjoy it and the more you'll do it. That's the metaverse. Now it's up to, like, for example, me as somebody who makes stuff for people, to be really thoughtful and just try to create experiences that use those tools for fun and joy. But that's it. It's nothing new. It's all around you.
This is definitely educational, and I think you're going to blow people's minds with it, because when I think metaverse, I think that it's probably some guy in his basement with these goggles who's, you know, suddenly changing the way he looks,
Mm-hmm.
and marching around like I'm rich and I don't live in my mom's basement and I'm doing all these kinds of things. And that's what the metaverse is about. But you're saying it's something
Right.
that's completely different and really reality.
Well, how is that different than Tinder, right? Like, or Instagram, to make it even more broader? Like, on Instagram, are you documenting getting dressed in the morning? Are you documenting when you're not feeling well, or when you have a headache, or when you're yelling at your kid? No, you're documenting the stuff where the you think is like that, not just interesting, but the stuff that you want to share,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're creating an identity. You're walking around the metaverse. It's just you're doing it using your camera and filters and posting those photos. That is exactly the same as somebody creating an avatar. The only thing that's different about it is the interface. And it is a very thin line between I'm using a filter that affects the light. Now I'm using a filter that smooths my skin.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm using a filter that changes the way my eyes look. Now I'm using a filter that slightly characterizes me. Now I'm using a filter that makes me look like a raccoon, right? Like, that is all the same thing. It's just how you choose to employ those tools. So you're doing it all the time. You're a nerd in a basement. You just didn't know
Yeah, no, but you're
it.
blowing my mind. And I'm sure that anyone who's listening is feeling the same way, because it's totally not what I thought it was. And now it makes more sense why someone like Facebook changed their name to Meta, because of
Mm-hmm.
these interactions. And now it truly does make sense. Unfortunately, I don't think Zuckerberg ever put this out there in the words that
Right.
you did, which is why everyone's like, huh?
Well, he's got different plans, because one of the challenges with the metaverse is it's built in code, right? And code is smart. Code contains information. So you can create, for example, the internet in the US is different than the internet in Russia right now, and different than the internet in China. And that's because they've changed the code. So from a metaverse perspective, there are going to be different physical rules and different capabilities and different cultural implications of those environments. So when Meta says we want to create the metaverse, they're not talking about for everybody. They're saying within the world of Facebook and its companies. That is that's not the metaverse. That's a digital environment where they can track your data, where they can target you with ads persistently and sell you stuff and use your information to sell stuff to other people. So when he changes his company's name to Meta, he's saying, I've got a business plan in which I can trap people by manipulating them, create algorithms which target and shift the way that they think, and do it all in a controlled environment. That's my plan, which is terrible. But
Insert
like
evil
that's meta.
genius laugh.
Yeah, 100%. But that's what that is what like a company that is like that is talking about building a digital environment. It's a marketing objective, and that's why I talk a lot about how I think if you're a socially responsible creative person, you need to be focused on making digital experiences with brands, because if we can prove that more inclusive, more ethical uses of data and richer environments are more effective, then the metaverse will be built upon that data. But right now, it's being built to target and optimize to target.
And I feel like so many of us know this now between the Netflix documentary that came out. Just we're all more aware of, yeah, they're targeting us. And, if I'm searching on Google for something, then all of a sudden the ads are popping up in my Facebook feed. So why is it that people still fall for it? Like, why are we not revolting against it? Or, and some are, some are like, I'm getting off Facebook, period. But what do we do about it?
What I think why people fall for it and what you do about it are two different things. I think if you have a TV, if you have a phone, if you use a map, a digital map, all of those things are sharing your data, right? And now when you're using a map, you're like, thank you, map, for working, right?
Yeah.
But you're telling it where you are, and you're telling it about your behaviors and your patterns. It's giving you feedback that is predicting the fastest route to get there. But that data isn't being used just on traffic. That data is also being used by governments and sold to people to target you and learning more and more about you. And the reason it's hard to turn off is because giving your data away creates a great experience, right? And there are a lot of positives, right? The internet is largely free because the exchange is you contribute your data and you get a great experience. You don't want to have to log into a website every time you visit it. You want to be tracked. So when you go back a day later, you're still logged in. And that's why, it's hard, because so much of our world is now built on this model, this financial model that Facebook has, where it's like, you give us your data and we'll give you content. Now, the way to fix it is there's lots of like Signal, a client of ours, like a fantastic, amazing messaging app that can basically take none of your data. And by using something like that, you're removing yourself slightly from the system. And you can feel safe sharing a message today that isn't going to come back and bite you 10 years later because somehow an insurance company got hold of it and is using it against you. The other thing you can do is try to manipulate the algorithms. And I have an article, I can send you a link to it, but on Spotify, I listen to Spotify all the time, right? I give them tons of data, but I also make playlists of music that I don't like. And
just to throw them off.
Yeah. And you can actually, because I'm like a big listener on Spotify, my data starts to have a big impact in driving people's recommendations from the recommendation engine. So if I take on a character and then try to make a playlist from that perspective, the blast radius of that choice is really big because I have a big impact on the data. So if all of a sudden I start listening to Barry Manilow out of nowhere, the algorithm is going to start recommending Barry Manilow to other people who are listening to music that I normally listen to. And they'll be like, why is this Barry Manilow here? And they might like it, right? And so you can do that if you want to.
I love it. I think we should all revolt and do that.
Yeah, it's fun, and it's a cool way to listen to music, because when you're engaged in these platforms, they're like, this is a music listening platform, but it's not just a music listening platform. It's an interactive platform where most of what you experience is music, but you're doing so much more than that. So it's really fun to kind of engage with these tools and play with them, because you can start to impact them. And to your point, like, you talked about the nerd in the basement putting on an identity, but you also talked about yourself being in a closet, making a podcast. And it's hard once you start getting into like digital interaction, what is the line between one of those crazy nerds that spends all their life online and me, an everyday human who's just using the tools? And the line is thinner than it's ever been. We're
Yeah.
all nerds now.
Yeah, we absolutely. And the more you talk about it, the more it makes complete and absolute sense. Like, I am the nerd in the basement, just not living in my mom's house, right?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
This has been incredible, Nathan. I so appreciate how you share your knowledge and do it in such a way that it's understandable and it makes complete sense. Like, we need you to be the spokesperson for all things metaverse, AI, so that the world can understand it and that we're not all sitting here going, what?
Call them up. Call them up.
I love it. Where can people find you and learn more about what you do and what that does?
Our website, you can find that.site. That's THAT.SITE. I am at Nathan Phillips on Twitter. And those are two great places to find what we're doing. And we've got lots of work. Our website's always changing. We have a really cool metaverse, specifically metaverse project that we're working on that'll be ready in about 2 weeks that I'm super pumped about. That I can't talk about yet, but it gives you an opportunity to think about the metaverse in a new way that I think is going to be really cool.
Awesome. This will come out probably just before that launches. So
Awesome.
People can listen to this, and within a week, they'll probably be able to go to your website and see what that's about.
Sick. Awesome. It was really nice talking to you, Michelle.
So good talking to you. Thank you.
You bet.
I told you that your mind was going to be blown. I finally feel like I have a grasp on what the metaverse is because Nathan simplified it in such a great way. So we're all utilizing the metaverse. It's not some special thing that Mark Zuckerberg created, and it's something that we can learn from. I'm fascinated by everything Nathan shared, and I'm so grateful that he took the time not only to come on the show, but to truly explain such a big concept to me and all of you. I think it's extremely important for us to educate ourselves and do our best to understand all of these new concepts because it will cause us to look at things differently and maybe take some new approaches on how we use the internet. And hey, if you have some free time this week, go make a random Spotify playlist just to mess with the algorithms because it's kind of snarky fun knowing that we do have the power to outsmart technology if we really try.